I noticed that there were definitely a lot of my employees who were really nervous about this word return. And every single time we put a new return date out there, there was a direct correlation that I could see, and I haven't been able to prove it yet, but we had a spike in our own attrition. If July 15th was the return date, our attrition spiked in July. And so, I was just sitting there thinking about it one day, and I just thought, when in business do you ever go backwards? Do you ever look backwards and talk about returning to something? You always look forward. Everybody wants to know, like, what's your next move? What does the future look like? Where is this company going? And yet we keep talking about returning, with regard to our people. And so I just said, you know what? We are banishing the word return. We're just not going to use that word anymore. And we're going to think about this as tomorrow, the future. I was like wrestling with the words. I just know it has to be forward looking. And I sort of worked with this firm that I work with, who does my employee value proposition work, Starfish. They're wonderful. And I articulated that. And then they came back with a couple of concepts, and one of them was, I think it was the Tomorrow Principles. But since we were working on leadership principles, I didn't want to confuse anyone. So I said, you know what? I love that. It's the principles of tomorrow that we should be developing right now.
Welcome to the Warriors at Work show. This is Jeanie Coomber, your guide and host. This is a show for men and women in the workplace who want to move from the predictable to the potent. This is your weekly dose of inspiration with an edge. I talk with CEOs and shamans, sports marketing executives and therapists. All of us are like-minded thinkers and doers who tell stories, share wisdom, and challenge each other to have the best life possible inside and outside the office. Welcome to your Warrior Conversation.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining me here at the Warriors at Work show. It's Jeanie. And today's conversation, I got to talk with Patricia Goodwin Peters, who's Senior Vice President, Human Resources at Atlas Air Worldwide. And I brought Patricia in. I've known her for a long time, and I have seen this woman in the middle of some extraordinary business circumstances. I've seen how steady and calm and warm and engaging she can be while she's making really tough decisions, while she's having to be really decisive. I had a front row seat to many of those experiences in my executive coaching expertise, and I had the opportunity to see her just in her genius. So when I started thinking about what companies are up to as it relates to figuring out what does the workforce of tomorrow look like, how do we ready ourselves for that, Patricia was one of the very first people I thought of. So if you've ever wondered, what it's like to transition from another industry into a very big global people-oriented role, you're going to hear Patricia's firsthand experience on what that was like to switch industries and bring a people-centric mindset into an organization where it wasn't necessarily something that was second nature to them. And then the other thing you're going to learn in this conversation is what disruption can mean to your bottom line and how it could have a very positive effect. And Patricia has a ton of excitement around the word disruption and all of the things that go with that. So it's my absolute pleasure to bring to you this conversation. I really hope that if you're in the world of people, if you're HR, if you're talent, or you're a business leader, and you want to hear from somebody who's entrenched in this world and has a really fresh perspective around what tomorrow can bring, then this conversation is for you. Enjoy. Patricia, thank you so much for coming back and having a conversation with me.
My pleasure. Oh my gosh, I'm just thrilled to be invited back. Anytime I get the chance to talk to you is just a good time.
Well, where I wanted to start is I think it's important to set the table around why did I ask Patricia to come back, and why did I ask for her to talk more about her experience as the head of HR at a very large cargo airline company. So like what's the so what here? So when I think of Patricia, I've known you for a long time and I've seen you in some incredibly challenging business circumstances where you had this incredible steadiness. So you had this beautiful blend of operating with tremendous clarity and curiosity amidst an insane environment. But you never lost also your ability to invite others in, be very, very engaging. So when I was thinking about, there's so much discussion about what the business landscape is going to look like, how we're going to prepare for this, how we're going to get our people ready, what do we need to be thinking about for talent. I was recalling so many of those instances where I saw you really embody these two incredible traits. But what fascinated me more than anything is your ability to not accept the black and white. You've had this amazing possibility thinking, how you even ask questions, how you explore dynamics. And I wanted to first start off with saying that to you, because I think that's really important that you hear that back. But B, like, where does that come from? Did you have like an incredible mentor in your career? Was it like a school teacher? Was it how you were brought up at home? How you have this beautiful blend of steadiness and clarity and curiosity with warmth and engagement? How do you do that, regardless of the circumstance?
Well, gosh, I mean, that's very flattering, and that's a lot. So I thank you for that. It's funny when you were describing the chaos, I was just thinking about like my sisters, like at home, right? There was always just growing up in a family of girls. I do have one brother, but I have 5 sisters and a brother.
I didn't know.
I can't believe you didn't know all the time.
No, and where are you in the birth order?
2, number 2.
Wow, 5
Yeah.
sisters.
5 sisters. And it's still chaotic. It's like still chaotic today. So it's interesting that you say that, because that's what I kept thinking about as you were saying it. Like, it's just you just function in chaos. That's what you do when you have like that many people in your family. And yeah, and I guess just the steadiness of it could be because I'm this, sort of higher up in the order of the siblings, right? So somebody had to sort of, be somewhat in control of chaos.
Yeah.
But it's probably just a personality trait that I have, where I just feel like, okay, if everything around me is in chaos, what do I gain by being chaotic along with it, right? So it's almost like I can get into this place of insulation where, okay, there's a lot of chaos going on here. I need to compartmentalize what's going on, get into problem solving, just, really stay in my zone and kind of just try to like think through all this. So that's probably the genesis of it. I don't know.
Where does your thirst for possibilities and what else? Like, I can almost see you in meetings going, okay, so this is what the data is suggesting, or here's the circumstance. What else is there? I almost feel like you're always looking around the corner.
Yeah, no, that is definitely something about me that has always been true, even since I was younger. I never wanted what everybody else had. I always wanted something a little bit different. I always, and that really went across everything, like with clothes or whatever. I just didn't want, I just always thought like, well, if everybody's doing that one thing, isn't there something about this that could be different? How can we think about this differently? That's definitely something that I have always gravitated towards. What else? I mean, in some ways, we're born into this world where a lot of things have already been like learned and told to us, right? So in the earlier part of sort of like, coming into the world, it just seems like there was like so much more. The possibilities for exploration were just so much greater. And and I don't want to not have that. I don't always want to be given given the circumstances or given the status quo without really, really trying to explore it in my own way and seeing if I can come to a different conclusion than somebody else came to.
Well, let's talk about that, because here you are heading up a HR for a global company. And you're in an environment which has been conditioned to think and operate in a certain way, very process oriented, very systematic. And here you are, you're this inquisitive, curious, what else thinker. How are you shepherding other people along with your philosophy?
You know, I wonder if I'm shepherding, right? I'm part of it is I just love to meet people where they are. I just love to understand, what makes them tick. And I think I just get really excited about the potential to do things slightly differently. I mean, I think especially within HR, HR is just one of those functions that hasn't really been able to hit like a stride, right? It always has these like lingering impressions of not being at a point where it needs to be, not satisfying the CEO, not necessarily delivering, not having the skills, all of that. You see studies about that all the time about HR. And again, for me, that in that situation, it's just about like, well, let's just like break down all these things that we think are HR and what are we really, really doing, right? We're trying to, as you said, shepherd people. We're trying to support an environment where people can bring their best selves to work, contribute at the highest levels, find a place of innovation, so on and so forth. Like that's at the essence of what we do. Like that's really, what we where we should be living and thinking about it that way. And I just get excited about that. I just get excited about what the possibilities are. And of course there's all these things that we need to do as in our function, right? There's all this sort of administrative stuff that you have to do, which is table stakes and all of that. But it's the strategy piece of HR that for me hasn't necessarily really come into its own yet. It really, and maybe in some companies it has, but I feel like there's still a world of possibility for where it can go. Just because it definitely, I would say, like as a function, doesn't necessarily sit in parity with some of the other functions within a C-suite, not at all companies, at least. And you see that institutionally as well, that you'll have the CFO signing off on a lot of required filings if you're a public company. And those filings more and more include people statistics and compensation statistics, which fall under the umbrella of HR, and yet the CFO is the one who's signing off on them, which tells you that the CHRO doesn't have that same level of status that the CFO has, right? There's something wrong about that system. So I feel like there's so much more that there's so much runway, to use an aviation term, for HR, and that gets me excited. And I hope that that gets my team excited as well. I hope they feel like they're part of something big.
So when you think about that philosophy, and that's almost like your mission to have more of a strategic seat in the way the organization operates and behaves. And you have this philosophy that you want to meet people where they are. And you're working in an organization that's tried and true. This is the way we've always done it. Mm-hmm. So tell us about some of your critical moves. So in the time you've been there, what are some of the things you've had to do?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, relationship building, of course, is always like first and foremost. When someone comes in and in my case, coming in from outside industry, coming into HR, and I'm coming into, as you said, sort of a tried and true industrial-like environment where HR was basically used for hiring people, firing people, it's
Compensation and benefits.
compensation and benefits. You know my name if I'm in trouble, right? Like
Right.
that kind of thing. So it's sort of like I would arrive at the doors of senior executives and they would say, "What did I do? Am I in trouble?" And it was like that sort of hurdle I had to overcome. No, you're not in trouble at all. In fact, I'm here to sort of see, how can we sort of improve things for you, right? Find talent for you, help you build your talent pipeline, help you develop the teams you have. And that was sort of like foreign, just like a foreign concept. Mm-hmm. And as crazy as that sounds, it actually is probably pretty prevalent in a lot of other companies, not
and
just.
They're probably skeptical when you were doing it, like, okay.
Yeah, no. Still.
Why would you want to do that for me?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, and every move I made was all about, you're just going to cut my heads. You just want to know this information because you're going to cut my head count. It's like, no, I'm not actually. That's not what I'm here for. If we come to that conclusion that's the best thing for your function, that's one thing, but we would arrive there together.
Wow.
So it's really, really, the trust building. It's painstaking. It takes a lot of time. It's not easy to do. And you just got to keep putting coins in that credibility bank. Got to keep putting them in.
Do what you say and say what you mean and do what you say.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that expression. Say what you mean and do what you say.
Yes.
Especially when you're building connection and really trying to build relationship equity, which is really what you're trying to do, because you can't, I'm imagining you would agree with this. You can't get people to change their behaviors until you've established a certain level of trust.
Yeah, for sure. You cannot. And even in the trust relationship, behavioral change is hard, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, they definitely, it's really is an evolution of stages that you go through when you really want to affect change. Because I think, if just go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, people are going to be protective and defensive first of that, the core security that they have in their role. So it's just, it's always tough to sort of introduce something new.
I'm curious, when you first started, so how long have you been at the organization?
3.5 years now.
All right. So when you started 3.5 years ago, like, what was the philosophy? What was the brand that you were thinking of when you started to begin your process? And now I'd love for you to talk about your brand. So Patricia comes in day one. Here's the brand I have in my mind. This is the brand I'm looking to develop. And then tell us what it looks like today.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I did come in and I talked a lot about talent mindset. Like, I had come in where we need to talk about a talent mindset, right? We have to talk about our people as, who's a high potential, who's a high performer. How can you distinguish, between those performance levels? Like, really just introducing those concepts. How do you set, challenging but attainable goals, so on and so forth. So that was something that I was introducing at the company, over time, and I'm still actually using that terminology and focused on the talent mindset. But in between there, COVID came around. There were a lot of different. So many different things that have happened at my company. So micro to us, and then macro with regard to COVID and everything else, which we actually were in a very fortunate position during that time, because we were so busy delivering. We were essential workers delivering PPE, so on and so forth. So it shifted. It shifted somewhat from talent mindset to just to incorporate, maybe it's a little bit more holistic, right? More thinking from an empathetic point of view. Not everyone is going to be the highest performing individual on your team. Not everyone is going to have potential to move 2 levels up. But everyone has a critical role to play in the organization. And just being a little bit more holistic about how we think about all of that, and how we think about these individuals who are working for the company, delivering day in and day out. I think just putting more emphasis on that group, that you don't always have to focus on the highest performing tier. That there's really something to say about those individuals who are just delivering every single day. So yeah. So anyway, I feel like I just feel like everything's become a little bit more holistic in terms of how you think about the composition of a workforce and what really drives the success.
And what were some of the moments that come to mind? I'll just think right off the top of your head here, where you could see that these executive teams particularly, and or the organization, you tell me which one comes up first, where they really started to get what you were saying and started to make some shifts. They were starting to have more of a talent mindset, and or maybe using words like empathy and encouragement and courage, and aren't we all in this together, having more of a team spirit. So I'm just kind of curious, what comes up when you think about like, yes, yeah, there it is. It's coming together.
Yeah, no, it completely. I mean, even on the leadership meeting the other day, just hearing my CEO sort of talk about, how, people are our greatest asset, and talking about like delivering on our promises to sort of put people first and things of that nature. Like hearing him say that just makes me feel like that came so naturally to him now. Like it's not him repeating back to myself. That totally came naturally to him. And it's actually been really great. My CEO has been with the company for close to 25 years. And I love hearing him say that comes with great advantage and institutional knowledge and experience, but it also can have its limitations. And I love that he says that. And I love that he says that, but he's learning, because that's all you can ever ask of a person to do, right? We all have different experiences. We've all had, we've all grown up in different ways. We've all had different demands put upon us. So it's really just all you can really ever ask of somebody is that, they're listening, they're learning, and they're kind of like moving in a direction of positive change. And I just love that. I just love hearing him say that. And I have to meet him where he is too, right? So you can't come in with all this like new age type of, talent mindset and, rewarding the top talent. And then, and then you're isolating a whole group of people who know in their heart of hearts, they might not be like the top tier talent, but they are delivering for you at day in and day out. And they want to be recognized too. So it's, I think it's been a learning for me too.
That's a really important distinction, because you're right. And when you think about talent and growing an organization and being very people centric, your mind tends to focus on, who's my top 10% or my top 20%. And I think you're really making a very important distinction, that you also want to focus on those that maybe that might not even be in their interest to get promoted, to take on additional scope and responsibility, but they're happy, they're productive, they're helping delivering on a lot of these commitments. And frankly, you can't have all of the high potential talent without those that are executing and are very happy in that space. So I think that's a really, really important distinction. And talking about listening and learning. So when I reached out to you, I was like, I really want to talk about what companies are doing as we're returning, blah, blah, blah. And you stopped me dead in my tracks. We banned that term. And I was like, okay. And you used the term principles of tomorrow. So I want you to say more about it. And I also would love for you to tie it to this tagline that Atlas Air has adopted as well. So tell us more about it.
Yes. Well, we kept throughout the pandemic, just like every other company was probably doing, I, and in fairness, it made sense. Everybody sort of shifted to this virtual environment almost overnight. I remember for me, it was March 18th where everything just shifted over, and no one was left in the office. I think I was one of the last few in the office. And, we all just thought, okay, whew, we're going to shift into this virtual environment. Hopefully it works. And thank goodness it did. And we'll be in this state for, a couple of weeks through, I forget what the dates,
that.
right? Like it'll be like, okay, but by the time Easter comes, this will all be gone, and we'll be going back and resuming our normal lives. So we said, okay, we'll return, our return date will be April 15th. And then it was sort of like, well, our return date will be, June 15th. And, and in the beginning, it was like these month by month increments, like everybody, there was sort of like this still really strong attachment to getting back to the office. And then as time went on, I noticed our returns were like 3 months at a time. They were no longer, 1 month at a time, because, you just could tell by the statistics that we weren't going to recover that quickly. And then, so initially, when the pandemic first hit, it was devastating for so many people who lost their jobs. And it was just a horrific point in time. And then there was sort of like this hockey stick recovery for some, not all, where a lot of people were working, figuring it out, how to work in this virtual environment. And then there was this great resignation and all this attrition that started to happen, over the course. I think that started in like July of 2020, on a macro basis in the US, and then sort of spiked, I think, really hit a peak in April of 2021. So for, starting in July and moving forward, you just started to see all this attrition. And some of that was just incredibly unfortunate that a lot of women actually left the workforce because when their kid, there's a lot of anxiety about kids going back to school. They weren't going back to school, and a lot of those responsibilities fall on the female of the household. And so they had to be home so that their kids could quarantine or go to school virtually, so on and so forth. So anyway, so that condition was sort of existing for a long time too. And I noticed that there were definitely a lot of my employees who were really nervous about this word return. And every single time we put a new return date out there, there was a direct correlation that I could see, and I haven't been able to prove it yet, but we had a spike in our own attrition. July 15th was the return date. Our attrition spiked in July. And so, I was just sitting there thinking about it one day, and I just thought, when in business do you ever go backwards? Do you ever look backwards and talk about returning to something? You always look forward. Everybody wants to know, like, what is, what's your next move? What does the future look like? Where is this company going? And yet we keep talking about returning, with regard to our people, like. And so I just said, you know what? We are banishing the word return. We're just not going to use that word anymore. And we're going to think about this as tomorrow, the future. I was like wrestling with the words. I just know it has to be forward looking. And I sort of worked with this firm that I work with, who does my employee value proposition work, Starfish. They're wonderful. And I articulated that. And then they came back with a couple of concepts. And one of them was, I think it was the Tomorrow Principles. But since we were working on leadership principles, I didn't want to confuse anyone. So I said, you know what? I love that. It's the principles of tomorrow that we should be developing right now. And it just sort of, they took that and they ran with it. And it kind of just took on this energy of its own. And, they came back with this great piece of work, but the tagline was Atlas, ready for everything tomorrow holds. And, we've got that, our logo is the Atlas holding the world. And it just hit the mark. It just resonated. And yeah, we just kind of launched it at our leadership meeting yesterday, and it's really getting a great reception.
So what's the plan? How are you going to get Atlas ready for everything that tomorrow holds.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole host of things that have to be reworked under that, right? Under those principles of tomorrow. So, first and foremost, I think like letting go of some status quo, like, how, I guess, hours around 9 to 5, hours around, in person versus virtual, like, those sort of parameters, this structure of how work gets done that we've been living with like forever. And it's a structure that actually it doesn't work for so many groups of people. It doesn't really work for many women. It doesn't work for minority groups. It just doesn't work. And you cannot let a moment like this slip away. It comes once in a century where you get this moment of disruption in a structure that has existed forever, and to just let that pass you by without making real impactful change would just be it would just be a travesty. So all my HR friends out there, my HR colleagues, we are not letting this moment slip by.
It's so typical that you're excited about disruption. You're like, oh my God, we are in the most uncertain time. It's this crazy, this is the greatest thing ever.
It is. I know it's a boatload of work because like everything has to be reworked, right? All your policies, how people are taxed. I mean, it's like all these like nuances to it that I've had to meander into that, trust me, I don't want to do. I don't want to spend the next 6 months working on how people get taxed. But hey, listen, if at the end of the day, it's going to create a more inclusive, free form working environment, then let's do it. Let's do it.
Oh, very exciting.
Yeah.
What concerns you about, I mean, what you're talking about sounds very exciting, is really embracing the disruption, looking at it in a much more holistic way. But I love more than anything is kind of completely eliminating what was really a manufacturing mindset that's a couple of 100 years old.
Yep.
But what really concerns you as you're basically steering the ship into a completely different direction? You're steering it into the storm.
Yeah, a lot, right? There's a lot that you don't necessarily want disruption for the sake of disruption, right? You have to be thoughtful about it, and sometimes in the process of including more people, you do isolate some, and I don't want to do that either. So when you're in a business like mine, and I'm sure in a business like many others, there is the structure that we talked about that has been somewhat disrupted, is still valid. It's still valid for a lot of jobs. It still has its purpose. And so it's just really walking that, it's creating that balance, right? Of how do we acknowledge that some positions actually will still need to have that kind of structure, because we do need that in our business. It has to, we need that degree of reliability. Some things are just scheduled and that's how they work. But still, how do we create something new, but still make everybody feel like some aren't being left behind as we're creating this new thing? I would say that's my biggest worry, because I want to be, I want us to, I don't want there to be multiple cultures sort of emerging in the organization. You want to make sure that you've got a consistent culture. It just manifests itself differently in different groups. So that's my biggest worry. And I don't know what the answer to that is yet, except for just, real transparency about, what the job requires, right? And with that transparency, people then are making a choice. Okay, that's how I want to work. I want to work that way. And so I feel like the company's been fair to me.
Mm.
So that's the biggest thing I worry about.
So let's switch gears a little bit because I'd like to talk more about you personally. And you're somebody who is in it for the growth and evolution. It's clear you're not just heads down transactionally thinking and operating in that way. What are you working on for yourself, for your growth and development, whether it's personal, professional?
Oh, probably a lot there too. A lot. I have to work on I mean, every single day I need to work on my confidence. And the interesting thing is, I was at this breakfast this morning and I was feeling super inspired, but there was this panel, and I do apologize. There is some work going on in my kitchen here. It's just more of the working from home. There was this panel where it was predominantly female. I think there were 5 female and 1 male, and he said, when I met with all of you this morning to prep, and as I'm sitting up here today, he said, I had a little bit of butterflies in my stomach, my palms were sweaty, and I actually feel a little bit intimidated. And I thought, yes, and he said, and I feel that way because I'm the only one. And
Wow.
I thought, yes, that is it. And he goes, now I know how you feel. When you walk, when you're sitting within a group and you feel like you're the only, and you are the only one, not feel like you're the only one, you are the only one. These feelings, start to sort of like boil up and that, they restrict. You probably have much better words for this than I do, Jeanie, but they restrict, your real potential from coming out.
Your inner critic.
Your inner critic. They get in the way of the words that you want to use. It's like not everything's coming together. And then later on, you're rehashing everything. Like, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why didn't I say this? So, just working on overcoming that, I think, is something that I will continue to work on probably for the rest of my life. And just, get it more and more under control as time goes on.
So I wanted to just share something going back to the confidence thing. I was just recalling, I worked with a therapist a number of years ago, and it was like the inner critic. How do we just quiet the chatter from the inner critic? Because we've all got one, and you're never sure. And they usually show up at the most inconvenient times.
Yeah,
it's one of those when you need confidence, you have access to it the least.
Exactly.
So what she taught me, it was this visual. She said, when that inner critic, which often is your younger self, shows up, she said, imagine you're driving a car. And so they show up and they're like, oh my God, why did you just say that? Did you just do that? Oh my God, that's not going to work. Oh, you're going to look so stupid. You talk to them. You don't dismiss them, because then what will often happen is the chatter just gets louder. They make a bigger deal. You thank them for their participation. You know that they care about you, and you know that they want what's best, and they're trying to protect you. I thank you for being here, but I'm the adult and I'm in charge.
Wow.
And she said, you could even visually put them in the back seat and just keep reminding them, I'm in charge. I'm the adult. I cannot tell you how often I have to use that, because the other thing that shows up with confidence is like, your lack of sleep can affect it. You might be replaying a situation that might have happened 20 years ago, and this person reminds you. There's certain behaviors that will trigger it. You just never know when it's going to show up. So to be compassionate with yourself and say, oh, that's just the inner critic. This person is designed to help me. I don't need them right now. I've got this. And it is amazing. Just that little trick is incredibly helpful. So maybe it's helpful to you and whoever else is watching, listening.
Yeah,
We all suffer from the inner critic, for sure.
I love it.
So where I would love to wrap up here today, I want you to just take a step back and think about like real tactical best practices, whether it's philosophies, whether it's things you have in your own repertoire, maybe it's best ideas, anything that you could share out with everyone that's listening, watching, that's maybe sitting with a pen and paper right now going, oh my gosh, what are the things I need to be thinking about? So best ideas, practices, what comes to mind that you want to share and leave with everyone here?
Oh, best ideas and practices. I would say that as you are thinking about who you're going to surround yourself with, right? Because we, as any kind of like leader or manager, or even if you're not, right? Even if you're not even in a position of management, you're just looking for your next opportunity, your next job. I would say really be selective of who you surround yourself with. And it doesn't always necessarily have to be what you think. And what I mean by that is I kind of like to surround myself with people who are different from me, who will sort of challenge me, and maybe even annoy me. Just because I want the challenge, which kind of like goes back to the beginning here. I really want the challenge. And some days, and a colleague of mine who I adore, she said the other day, like some days you're going to be mad at me. Some days I'm going to be mad at you. But at the end of the day, we're gonna come out with a better product, and that is really true. Like in those moments, sometimes you feel like if I don't have tranquility and I don't have like peace throughout the course of my working day, something's not right. That's kind of like I need to like operate in that state of mind. Well, if I go back to the concept of disruption, I think greater things are born out of, a little bit of craziness. You'd be amazed.
What's the behavior that really irks you, that really annoys you?
Negativity. Like, yeah, definitely negativity. Not like someone like not being solution oriented is one. And then the other one is when self-centeredness, when it's all about the person, especially at work, right? Because when you think about work and you think about you're working for a company, you're working in the company of others. And so there is no place for self-centeredness. So those are the two things that probably drive me nuts. Those are the two things I choose not to surround myself with. But people can annoy me in other ways, and that's okay.
Well, I am so appreciative of everything that you've just shared here. Like, this was such a fun and interesting conversation, Patricia. So until next time, be well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Jeanie.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Warriors at Work show. If you are interested in learning more about what we do at the Warriors at Work show and platform, be sure to go over to my website, Jeanie Coomber, and subscribe to my monthly Warrior Playbook newsletter. I share everything that I'm up to month by month, as well as some lessons and insights that I've learned. I'm also interested in hearing any feedback you have about this conversation or future topics. So reach out to me directly on jc@jeaniecoomber.com or on LinkedIn. Be sure to tell your friends and your colleagues about this Warriors at Work conversation. Subscribe, review, and rate us. It's the best way to get this message out into the world. Be well.